There was a boy that history almost forgot, not because his story was small, because the people closest to him decided it was. He was not the oldest, not the tallest, not the one who walked into a room and made people stop and look. He had brothers who did that. Brothers who stood with the kind of presence that made fathers proud and nations take notice. Brothers who were built for greatness, or at least looked the part. And then there was him. While his brothers trained, he was sent to the fields. While his brothers were celebrated, he was forgotten. While his brothers stood in front of important men and were considered for important things, nobody even thought to call him inside. His father had sons. And then he had this one, the youngest, the quiet one, the one you sent to watch the animals when the real work was happening somewhere else. He was not asked, he was not considered, he was not included, he was dismissed before anyone gave him a reason to be. And the cruelest part was not the dismissal itself, it was who it came from, not strangers, not enemies, his own father, his own brothers. The people whose belief should have been the easiest thing in the world to give, the people who had watched him grow, who had eaten at the same table, who had slept under the same roof. They looked at him and saw nothing worth seeing, so they sent him to the fields. And before we go any further, I need to ask you something, because maybe you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you have been that person in your own life, the one who was overlooked, the one who was not called inside when the important decisions were being made, the one whose own family looked at you and decided you were not the one. How many times did someone who should have believed in you choose not to? How many times were you sent to your own version of the fields? And here is the real question. What did you do with that? Because what he did with it is everything. He went to the fields, and in the fields, something began. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a boy, alone, with the animals, with the silence, with nothing but time and the decision about what to do with it. And this is where most men lose, not in the big moments. Not in the battles or the betrayals or the public failures, in the quiet, in the alone. In the moment when no one is watching, and no one will ever know what you chose to do with the time they gave you when they were not paying attention. Most men in that position shrink. They accept the version of themselves that the people they loved handed them. They carry the dismissal like a stone that only gets heavier with time. They wait for someone to come and tell them they were wrong about you. And that someone never comes. But this boy did something different. He understood something in those fields that most men spend their entire lives missing. The only thing you truly control is what you do inside the life they gave you, not what they think of you, not what opportunities they offer you, not whether they call you inside or send you back to the animals, only what you do with the quiet they hand you when they are not paying attention. That was the one freedom they could not take from him, and he used it completely. He started seeing things other men could not see, patterns in chaos, danger before it arrived. He developed the kind of instinct that only comes from being alone long enough to actually listen to yourself. Are you doing that? In your own silence, in your own alone time, are you becoming someone? Or are you filling every quiet moment with noise so you never have to sit with the question of who you actually are? One more scroll, one more video, one more hour consuming what someone else built instead of building something yourself, because he could not afford to do that. When danger came to those fields, it did not announce itself. It came in the dark, when he was alone, when there was no one to help and no one to see what he chose to do next. And every single time danger came, he stood. Not because someone was watching, because that is who he was deciding to become in the moments when no one was. His brothers trained with weapons and instruction and the eyes of people who believed in them. He trained with silence and solitude and the weight of being forgotten. And what he built in that silence was not just skill, it was the unshakable knowledge of exactly who he was, the inner world that nobody could touch, the identity that no dismissal could destroy. Thousands of years later, the Stoics would give this a name. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel. The fortress built inside a man that no external force can reach. Epictetus, born a slave who owned nothing, called it the one true freedom. The freedom over your own mind, your own response, your own becoming. But David practiced it long before any of them put a name to it. He built his inner citadel in the fields, in the silence, in the years when nobody was watching. And that is what made everything that came next possible. While his brothers were busy being celebrated for what they looked like, he was becoming dangerous for what he actually was. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to build in the silence with no audience and no guarantee that anyone will ever see it? Or do you need someone to believe in you first before you start becoming who you are supposed to be? Because he did not wait. And then one day, the nation needed someone. Not someone who looked like a warrior, someone who actually was one. Every celebrated man stood still. Every trained fighter stood still. Every man who had been given every advantage and every reason to be ready. They all stood still, and he was not even supposed to be there. He had been sent to bring food to his brothers. That was his role that day. Not warrior, not hero, not the one anyone was looking at. Just the boy from the fields, running an errand. But he saw what was happening. And here is where I need to stop. Because this moment happens in every man's life. Maybe not in front of a nation, maybe not with an enemy standing in the field, but there is always a moment. Where something needs to be done and nobody is doing it. Where you could walk away and nobody would blame you. Where it is not your problem and not your responsibility and not your battle. You could deliver the food and go home. You could stand with the crowd and wait. Are you going to be another brother standing still while someone else steps forward? Are you going to show up when it actually matters? Or are you going to do the bare minimum and expect to be celebrated? Because he made a choice that day that had nothing to do with luck. He stepped forward. And understand this clearly. What happened next was not a miracle. It was the inevitable result of years of invisible preparation. He was not the warrior nobody expected. He was the warrior nobody saw being built. He walked toward the enemy with the calm of a man who had already faced danger alone. Already stood when everything told him to run. Already proven to himself in the dark of those fields what he was made of. He did not fight like a boy trying to prove something. He fought like a man who already knew, and when it was over, when the enemy fell, when the nation that had overlooked him suddenly turned and saw what he had done. The celebration was unlike anything they had ever seen. His name was on every tongue, the boy from the fields, the one nobody believed in. The one his own father had not thought to call inside when greatness was being considered. That boy had just saved a nation. And now I need to ask you the uncomfortable question, because this is where most men lose themselves. Not in the struggle, in the celebration, when things finally go right. When people finally see you. When the validation arrives that you waited so long for. Do you lose yourself in it? Do you let the crowd's version of you replace the one you built in the dark? Do you stay in the applause so long that you forget who you were before it arrived? He did not. When the celebration settled, he went back to the fields. Not because he was forced to, because he chose to, because the fields were home. They were where he knew who he was. And no amount of celebration was going to make him forget that. The crowd cannot give a man something he already has. And the crowd cannot take away something they never gave him. That is the Stoic way. Not chasing the applause, not needing the validation. Returning always to the thing that was built before anyone was watching. But the world had seen him now. And the world does not forget a man like that easily. The king called for him. And everything changed again. Because the palace was nothing like the fields. The fields had silence and the clean honesty of knowing exactly what was trying to harm you. The palace had something far more complicated. People who smiled at him in public and sharpened their knives in private. People who saw what he was becoming and felt something dark move inside them. Fear. He had gone from invisible to undeniable, and undeniable men make certain people very uncomfortable. The jealousy came quietly at first. Then it became persecution, from people with power, from people with influence, his own family still doubting, the people who should have stood beside him turning away. He was hunted, pursued, betrayed by people he had trusted. And through all of it, he kept going, not because he was immune to the pain, because he understood something his enemies never did. The obstacle in front of him was not blocking his path. It was building him. Every persecution, every betrayal, every attempt to destroy him was creating more of the man they feared. Are you going to let what they do to you break you? Or are you going to let it build you? Because he chose to let it build him, every time, and slowly, quietly, without announcement. People stopped seeing the boy from the fields. They started seeing a leader. Not because he had declared himself one, because that is what happens when a man builds himself in silence long enough. The world eventually has no choice but to see what was always there. And then he became king. And for a time, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. He led with wisdom. He built with the same quiet discipline forged in him during all those years when nobody was watching. The nation prospered, and he deserved every moment of it. But here is the thing about success that nobody warns you about. Success is not the test. The struggle is not where most men fall. It is the comfort. Because in the struggle, you know who you are. In the comfort, you forget. And he forgot. Not all at once. Never all at once. It started small. The way it always starts. One moment of letting his eyes go where they should not have gone. One decision made from desire instead of discipline. One choice that the man in the fields never would have made, because the man in the fields was hungry, and hunger keeps you honest. Think about your own life right now. How many times have things been going well, and you felt yourself softening? How many times did you reach for the easy thing when the hard thing was what you needed? One more scroll when you should have been building. One more hour of comfort when you should have been disciplined. One more night of telling yourself tomorrow, I will be better. It always feels harmless in the moment. That is exactly what makes it dangerous, because David did not fall in battle. He did not fall under persecution. He fell in a quiet moment of comfort, when he should have been somewhere else, when he let desire make a decision that discipline never would have allowed. And then he made it worse. He covered it up. And the man who had once been so clear about who he was became someone he did not recognize, not overnight, quietly, the way it always happens. The people around him said nothing, because that is what people do when you are powerful. They go quiet. They tell you what you want to hear because the truth has become too expensive for them to offer. Until one man decided that he loved David more than he feared him. One man walked in and told him the truth. Not gently, not carefully, the truth. And I need to ask you something right now. Do you have that person in your life? The one who will tell you the truth when everyone else has gone quiet? The one who loves you enough to risk everything to make sure you see yourself clearly? Because David had one. And when the truth finally reached him, he did not make excuses. He did not blame his circumstances. He looked at himself clearly and said, I was wrong. Not to the crowd, not as a performance, in private, in the quiet, in the same place where he had built himself as a boy. That moment of radical honesty, witnessed by no one, that is what made him great. Not the victories, not the throne. The willingness to look at himself without flinching, to say I fell, to say I was wrong, to say I am not too proud to begin again. That is the most stoic thing a man can do. Not the discipline when things are hard, the honesty when things are broken, the humility to return to yourself after you have lost yourself. He rose, not to the version of himself before the fall, to something deeper, something that could only exist on the other side of that kind of honesty. And he went on to become the king that nations still study. The man whose words written during his highest moments and his lowest ones still guide men today. Not because he was perfect, because he was honest about being imperfect. And because he never stopped building, even after he fell, even after everything. He rose. His name was David, King of Israel. And we are still speaking his name thousands of years later, not because he was perfect, because he was real, and because the man built in silence always rises. The question is not whether you will fall, you will. The question is what you do when you are on the ground. Do you stay there? Do you make excuses? Do you cover it up and hope nobody notices? Or do you do what David did? Look at yourself clearly, tell the truth, and rise. Men built in silence. That is who this is for.